as you've said, your work is not just about the triumph of neoliberalism from above, relying on neoliberalism from below. It's also about resistance and about what I would call, in the case of feminism, kind of anti-neoliberalism from below. And I think this is very important because what you do is not accept the division between feminism and studies of neoliberalism. Feminism often is supposed to talk about women's issues, and women's issues might be reproductive rights or it might be sexual violence or etc. And in practice, that often means that discussions about neoliberalism are among men, and discussions about women's issues are among women. But in fact, in your work, I mean, that division doesn't work. On the contrary, it's how you can have a feminist reading of neoliberalism. And in particular, I was thinking that perhaps you could tell us about extractivism and how a revised version of this concept can be developed from a feminist standpoint.
Yes. Talking about this progressive moment in Latin America, I think that the other side of this capacity for state intervention was the expansion of extractivist policies. And also it was like a very important debate at that moment in Latin America. Well, this is the only kind of opportunity that the region, as Latin America, has to be part of global market. So we have the so-called counter effects, but at least at the end of the day, this is the rent that will allow us to produce social interventions, maybe public infrastructure, a little bit less, but so I think that these anti-extractivist struggles were very much, obscured during the progressive governments, because they were, they appeared as a sort of anti-progressive government critic. But I think that after the defeats of different progressive governments, and also in connection with feminist movement, this critique of extractivism was very much important, but also very much popularized and very much take it into account also to explain this defeat of progressive governments. And for me, of course, there are a lot of experiences in Latin America of the so-called defenders of the earth, of the water, of territories that were targeted because their struggle. But also, I think that is interesting how the feminist movement is all the time trying to connect the literal extractivism against territories, raw materials, natural resources, with other kinds of extractivism. For example, financial extractivism, how debt, for example, through this financial inclusion that we were talking before, is a way of extractivism. But also real estate speculation and the prices of housing are nowadays in the framework of extractivism. So I think that is a sort of expanded notion of extractivism that is very useful, and I think it was very much pushed by feminist readings and feminist perspective, and especially feminist struggles that were able to produce a critique against progressive governments, and at the same time they were so situated in social reproduction that they could analyze the everyday impacts of neo-extractivism in a very concrete and also political way. So I think that is important, a very important element to analyze also the anti-capitalist dimension of feminism in Latin America. These struggles against extractivism. It is, I think, a very material critique of how social reproduction is very much impacted by neo-extractivism, how dispossession of territories are being deployed in ways that women are the protagonist of the suffering, of the dispossession, of the displacement. And I think it's also like the other side of this neo-developmentalism that we were talking before.
And I would say that your book that is coming out in French now, and that has already been published in English and Spanish on the feminist reading of the debt, is just one more piece in this general approach, a feminist approach to neoliberalism.
I think that one singularity in Argentina is that we were able to connect the issue of debt, that it was a traditional issue in Argentina, but very much connected with public debt, because since the IMF is very much present in our country, but especially after the dictatorship, the public debt is a central issue also in terms of how the public debt that the dictatorship took was central in the limits of the so-called democratic transitions during the 80s in different countries of Latin America, and how the IMF was also present in the 2001 crisis, and how the IMF returned to Argentina with Macri's government. So we have there a line of public debt, but I think that the singularity of the feminist movement in Argentina is the connection between public debt and household debt. And I think that was part of a conceptual analysis, but also a political work that was able to translate into political slogans. For example, we want ourselves alive, free, and debt-free, trying to connect the economic autonomy with the idea of sexist violence, for example. So for me, this way to analyze household debt in connection with social reproduction, in connection with popular economies, in connection also with this very ambivalent subjectivity that we were talking before about neoliberalism from below, and how debt in social reproduction is reorganizing the terrain of social reproduction. But at the same time, how the different experiences of women, of communitarian network, but also feminist politicization of the debt was very much important to produce a political and economic critique of austerity, but also to trace the connection with the moment of financial inclusion in the previous years.
One thing is that feminism is like Marxism in the sense that it's not just about understanding the world, it's also about changing the world. And so in addition to concepts, there are practices, and the feminist strike is one that you have been thinking about a great deal and participating in as well. So would you tell us about this technology of change that is used by feminism?
Very old technology. No, I think that the strike in terms of feminist strike, that we had that experience in Argentina since 2016, and then as an international experience since 2017, I think, every March 8 organizing this feminist strike in different countries at the same time. For me, was very important and interesting in terms of the popularization of other reading of labor, non-paid labor, precarized labor, unwage labor, informalized labor, and especially the question about how you can strike if you are not a formalized worker, if you are part of popular economies, or if you are a freelance student, and so on and so on. I think that the feminist strike was like a very political research tool in one aspect to problematize who are the subjects included in the idea of a strike, traditionally very much masculinist, unionized, also white. And on the other hand, how it was a concrete experience of political articulation with unions, cooperatives, social movements in a feminist dynamic. So I think this is also very, very important, because it's at the same time, as you were saying, a very practical experience of political articulation and a conceptualization that is, well, framing this idea of feminist strike. And in particular, for me, was very important to conceptualize about that, because I was at the same time inside the organizational process and very much committed with these discussions about labor from a feminist point of view, and also continuing these debates about neoliberalism. So I think that is not a coincidence that the greatest and the more massive moments of the feminist movement was during Macri's government. And at the same time, very much connected with the capacity of recreate different lines and genealogies of struggles, also taking into account popular economies, unions, but also universities, communitarian experiences, and also I think it was a political subjectivation for a new generation. If you think in the Green Tide moment, well, you have now a whole political generation that was, yes, inscribed and who experienced that moment of Ni Una Menos and Green Tide as an important moment. And nowadays you have another kinds of political sensibilities that are very much transversal, I would say, in terms of feminism and transfeminism. And it's very much related with the counter-revolution that we are experiencing now.
And indeed, in the same way that there's neoliberal international, and you've talked about that, and in the same way that there's a neo-fascist international, and we're talking about this more and more, there is a feminist international that is basically, there's a circulation not just of social movements, but also of ideas, and actually the reception of your work is one more illustration of this.
Yes, I think that it's like an attempt to reframe and rethink and reorganize internationalism from below. That is a long history and tradition. And in the last years, the feminist movement in different parts of the world, I think it was a concrete experience in this production of resonances, slogans that were translated in not only in terms of language, but also translated in terms of political praxis. and also how different forms of political organization, like campaigns, strike, etc., were part of a sort of, yes, internationalization without the traditional tools of political party, maybe. And I think it is also very much related with this capacity to confront sexist violence in connection with neoliberal violence. And I think that how you translate that connection in each context, it is an exercise of political translation. So it is not the same how it is connected, neoliberal violence, racist violence, institutional violence, and sexist violence maybe in Argentina and here in France. But at the same time that the common question about how to develop, to analyze, and to produce political organization through the question, through the lens of this intertwined set of violence, it is very important and very dynamic in terms of this internationalization or transnational or trans-border struggles.